Okay, so who is the very beautiful lady that we are seeing now in this screen? Let me introduce you the awesome Emily Jane Brontë. So Emily Jane Brontë is a celebrated and famous British novelist, poet, writer, of course, and also a storyteller. She was born in Yorkshire 1818, and she died because of tuberculosis at the age of just 30 years in Hawthorne in 1848. So she is known because of her unique and extraordinary novel published 1 year before her death in 1847, Wuthering Heights, which is considered as one of the best narratives in English language, and of course one of the best works during the Victorian Romanticism. So let's talk about her life. So Emily was the third daughter of an Anglican priest called Patrick Branwell, her father. So he was a Puritan priest. He was very religious, and he was a very close-minded man, a very strict and hard father. And also he was an eccentric. So in 1821, the mother of the sisters Brontë died. So the family counted with three sisters who were Charlotte Brontë, Anne Brontë, and of course Emily. One brother who was Branwell, and her father. They were like very young, but they were sickly. They were precocious people, but they had a lot of literary imagination, and they were full of artistic impetus. So besides Emily, there were her two sisters who also wrote poems and read. So the girls and the boy were hardly raised by a maternal aunt who took care about them, and they were raised having a specific and hard disciplines and rules in the family because of their father. As I told, he was a Puritan. So he was a radical Puritan. So he considered the most innocent pleasure as something sinful. Just to give you some examples of their lifestyle, he used to burn the shoes of the girls when he thought that those shoes were too elegant. And also he imposed like eating potatoes as the main family's economic support. So you can see like their lifestyle. So the place in where they lived is very important, Warwickshire. It was a very cold place, and of course Emily all her life lived in the field. She never get to know the city. That's why she just developed her work with loneliness and melancholy feelings because of the place where she used to live and where she used to grow. So when she used to write, sorry. So they spent their best years, their youth, in the wild and desolated regions and fields of Yorkshire. It was full of vegetation, and there in the silence, she get to know nature, that communion with nature. Of course, she knew mystic, supernatural, metaphysical, and even demonic events, and she experimented a strange happiness, like having these kind of feelings of melancholy and sadness that I told you. So she also shared her passion for poetry and reading with her sisters. So in Charlotte Bronte published a book in which they had all written poems. So this book was called Poems by Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell, which were like the pseudonyms that they used at that time, because as we know, women were not used to publish books by their own. So they also wrote verses, poems, and fantastic stories. In 1842, her sisters decided to go and study in Brussels. They wanted to study French because they wanted to become teachers. So they left Emily alone there, like in the field, So this time was very hard for her. I mean, it was a very, like, a lot of inspiration, because she felt loneliness, exile, of course, melancholy, sadness. So she had to deal with those kind of sentiments, and of course with her wild environment and atmosphere, talking about nature, of course. So in the poems that she wrote during this period, she shows like a lot of spirituality, and she talk about the ability to have that communion, that bound with nature. And of course she also talk about loving nature, even in the saddest moment or the saddest aspect of her life. So sometime later, she returned and she decided to come back and to live with her father in Howard, sorry. And there, she fully gave herself to writing. That was the moment where she wrote Guthrie Heights. So she also wrote new poems and also romantic narratives, and she published her book in 1847. 1 year later, it was like a tragedy for the family, because their brother Branwell, he died after having a very uncontrolled and active life. He was an alcoholic and he died. It's supposed to be by an overdose of drugs. In this case, we're talking about opium, narcotics. So he died, and then the tuberculosis didn't take too much to end with the life of her elder sisters, and also with her life. So he died. She died. Sorry. And something very curious is that she died, but just 2 hours before dying, she let a doctor to be called. So she was a very strong woman, and of course that we are going to see in the next video that she had a that her life had a very big influence in her masterpiece Guthrie Heights.